Hello there everybody and welcome to a new video for Age of Wonders 4. In this one I got 10 advanced tips and tricks for the Industrious culture for you. We're going to go deep into the cultural intrinsics of these guys, and I'm going to talk about the things that you can really only pull off with your Industrious people and things that are really important to note to make these guys really strong. Now, let's get started with number one. It's basically quite obvious, but I want to talk about why it is so important. So, your scouts got the ability to prospect. That's really nothing new. We got that stuff. We can here prospect all these impassable provinces. This is your early game steroid. So, all those mountain ranges that you might find are wealth. You really are able to boost your early game so massively by just picking up what's around there in these mountain ranges, and you can also do that underground. This is what brings you through the early game super easy. You not only get a lot of resource, you also get items for your heroes to work with, and that's just amazing. Use this as much as you can, because I personally think this is what lets you expand early on super easily, because you will have tons of stuff if you happen to be lucky enough to have materials around you. The opposite is also the case if you don't have any of these structures around you in the early game. You will be a lot slower, and this is a severe disadvantage for Industrious players. If that ever happens, crank out a few prospectors more and really try to find the last little corner of a world where you can prospect safely, because we really need that to get through the early game. So, number two, something way less obvious. I want to talk about your steel shapers and what you can do with them. So, the steel shapers' core ability is to transform bolstered defenses and resistances into HP and strength. So they can create that by themselves by bolstering the defense one turn and then transforming it into HP the next turn. That's not so fascinating. You can utilize this pretty well if you have two steel shapers, one buffs, one heals, but the real beauty lies in the hidden synergies in your tomes that are not clearly seeable at the first glance. There are many tomes that actually provide the stat that you need. So, for a quick example, Staves of Warding gives your supporters the ability to add 2 bolstered resistance whenever they do support their allies. That means once you have that enchantment online, your Steel Shapers will already heal for 2 units stronger and give your units 20% more damage by just having this little thing online. This doesn't stop here. We have many parts where this actually is utilizable. Tome of Summoning, Arcane Supercharge. You gain here bolstered stats. You can burst heal a unit with this spell, because you can strip down 6 stacks of bolstered defenses and just transform that into HP. There's more of that, actually. We got also the Tome of Beasts, providing Call of the Wild, giving all your animals and cavalries bolstered defense. Again, the same thing. It's burst heal and a attack damage steroid if needed. And the Tome of Vigor does the same thing. Unleash Beast also gives bolstered defenses. And we also have here in the Tome of Transmutation the jolly old Transmuter, whose attacks are actually giving your allies bolstered defense. All these things synergize massively well with your Steel Shapers. Admittedly, your Steel Shapers aren't too impressive as long as you aren't using any of these extras. But oh my god, the moment you have free access to bolstered stats, these guys are stupidly good at burst healing people, because of the fact that the cooldown of the skill is amazingly low. If you have enough opportunity to put that stuff back on your units, these guys are massive healers. So it's easy to underestimate, and it does require some setup, as do most things with this culture, but the payoff is huge. So, number 3, a easier and quicker understandable thing for this culture. You have mounted tier 3 shield units, and this is crazy good. Their only weakness is that spear units are really powerful against them, but apart from that, you have one of the most intimidating tier 3 shield units that a culture could possibly have. So don't sleep on the mount options that you got there. The You have several options here. I use the nightmares because you know, I'm playing a morale based build here, so shaving off the enemy's morale by just plotting the defensive units in front of them is amazing. But you can utilize wolves for more damage, you can use spiders for that OP burst AoE stuff. They are really amazing with mounts, and I personally think that the Industrious culture loses a lot of its smack if you don't mount those tier 3 shield units. Just my personal opinion, though. Number 4, I want to talk about Fortification, because Fortification is a trademark move of these guys. The really interesting part about this faction is that you have access in every city to the Bastion's Barricade. This thing is insofar stupidly good as it adds 20 fortification health to your city. Why am I emphasizing this so high? The thing is, as long as there is garrison strength, the enemy can't just run into your city. Basically, with the Industrious culture, you can build a city right in front of your enemy, fortify it as hard as you can, and this way, if your enemy ever wants to conquer your cities, you will have easily 2 turns more than the average culture due to this cultural building alone. You can now go ham and go for all these other tomes that allow you to give you even more fortification stuff. You find lots of that in the Materium tome and the nature tomes. They are both quite good at providing some fortifications, but there's something in between everywhere. You have a lot of fortification health spells all over the board, and I personally think they are highly synergistic with the Industrious culture because it is really good to have just a turn more. Basically, you can hide your army back at the Spelljammer province and then let your enemy run towards there. Let him spend some money on those siege projects and then smack him. It's a really interesting thing that you can only do with these guys in its full extent, because the Bastion's Barricade is, there aren't too many city structures that provide so much fortification health just in one go. That's really an advantage that you can play out, which gives you a lot of flexibility in your warfare. So, number 5, I want to talk about the fact that these guys are stupidly good about racking up production income, and at some point you might find that actually quite useless. But it's not. I want to talk in this point what production actually can be translated to. A city that cranks out a lot of production can always, if nothing else is attractive, generate merchandise. With that merchandise, you can buy stuff in other cities. Basically, I discovered for myself that one of the strongest sides of the Industrious culture is to pump out stupidly much production and then let those cities just sit on that and generate merchandise. If I feel like, yeah, they have all the buildings they need now, they generate gold, lots of gold. You can print armies so fast with that because you can use hurry recruitment a lot better than other players. Also because you have the special bonus here on your tier 3 town hall, which gives you a lower cost on buy now. So this is a massive synergy because you can produce a lot of gold and you can get more efficiency out of your gold. Basically, these guys get more out of their gold as soon as they have a tier 3 town hall. So it's a pretty good synergy that you can easily use if you know that it's around. So number 6, I want to talk about another thing that's really important to note. Your culture is very, very one-sided in terms of damage. Come on, info boxes, don't troll me. Here, you see, I got some fire elemental damage in these, but your baseline roster is pure physical damage. Therefore, adding in some elemental damage into your build is mandatory, in my opinion. In this scenario, I solved the situation with adding in some pyromancers and some skulls for some fire damage, but generally, either you have some damage variation via unit enchantments or summons, or you make sure that you use plenty instances of Sunder defenses to shave down the enemy's defenses if you want to rely on physical alone. But otherwise, it might be a problem for you in the later stages of the game to actually deal damage properly, because you will really notice that even your supporters deal physical damage at some point when you ever run into a high physical resilience culture. So opting into some diversity in your damage roster really, really helps out a lot there. Good. Number 7, I want to talk about Retaliation and how stupidly good it is for this culture. Not only do you have 2 shield units, one shield unit can even taunt. The other guy is really good at bolstering the defenses around him. He even gives bolster defense stacks. But it doesn't stop here. We even have access to the most crazy spear unit available in the cultural roster, at least in my humble opinion, and that's because the Rune of Retaliation is a thing. Like 40% of the sustained damage will reflect it back. Basically, all you need to do is just boost up the defenses of these guys, have some supporters back behind them healing them up, and actually you can look at the enemy killing himself, and while they're doing that you can tell them to stop hurting themselves. It's really, really good, and this unit alone can be the backbone of an entire strategy. So you're really good at retaliating, so this should really reflect in your playstyle. These guys can also be just parked in front of the enemy, and usually when I'm playing Industrious, I just let the enemy come, hunker up, bolster up, and heal away what kind of artillery fire comes in, because at some point the AI will always willingly throw its units in the arms of your shield wall, and that's when the fun begins. You just have to have the patience for that to happen, otherwise your combat will be a little bit jittery. You really need that hunker down and let them come strategy for your combat, but they are very, very well suited for that. This is also, by the way, the reason why the Industrious culture sucks at auto-resolving, because the AI always throws everything in the face of the enemy. That doesn't suit the Industrious culture at all. Now, number 8, I want to give the Arbalests one point on this list, because I often heard the sentiment that these guys are bad units. They're not. They are really, really important for your battle plan because of the overdraw crossbow ability. The only downside of this thing is that it's featuring a relatively low range. It would be massively better if it had a range of 6, but this skill is your shock unit, basically. This is important because the enemy can easily outplay you by just hunkering down in front of your units just like you do, and then all of a sudden there is that wet noodle slap duel between your shield units and their shield units, and this is what the Arbalest fixes. You can punch enemies out of their defense mode with these guys, and that's why they are so important. You cannot tolerate defense mode on the enemy side. This is your problem if you have that. If the enemy is allowed to go into defense mode on your side, you will really notice how steeply your damage drops off. And that's what the Arbalests fix. On top of that, they feature a pretty high base damage. And I personally love these guys to synergize them with morale and crit, with a morale and crit playstyle, but more about that later. The quintessence of this point here is your Arbalests are really necessary for your game plan to disrupt the enemy's defensive measures, because that is basically your kryptonite if the enemy starts to do the same stuff as you do, and the Arbalests hinder them to do that, and that's why they are damn important, and you should always have at least 2 of these guys in your banners, like in your total composition of 3 banners, I mean. Okay, so number 9. I want to talk about how damned high the synergy between the Industrious culture and supportive playstyle is. You are very, very good at outlasting the enemy, and that's just your natural state. Therefore, You can either rely completely on the steel shapers alone with the methods I introduced in point 2. You have plenty of sources for bolstered defenses and resistances to make these guys go crazy in terms of healing potential. Or you go like I did here and you add in some foreign supporters from a tome unit or from a tome or something like that. There's several options that you can take. The nymphs from the nature tome serve really well, but you could even go as far and pick up the chaplains from the tier 1 order tomes or the beast masters. Well, they don't really support your dwarves, forget about the beast masters, but the idea here is foreign supporters can fill up that slot as well. And I made the experience that any form of support, any form of strengthening and adding in bolstered defenses and adding in crit and adding regen and adding in rally, all these things go so well with these guys because they are, like I'd like to say, naturally good receivers for buffs due to their high resilience. That's all. Any buff is well spent on any of your frontliners. There's no frontliner which I would say, nah, not worth buffing unless he's not in front of an enemy. But even your tier 1 units hold up pretty well, even in later stages of the game, because of their innately high shield value. So use that support synergy when you want to build up your Industrious cultures build, because that's where I personally think is the true power of these guys centered in. And number 10, last but not least, I want to talk about morale crits, like I said when I was talking about the Arbalests. So, for one thing, like we have already seen, these guys are massively good at outlasting or lasting out in the fight. Therefore, any form of morale gameplay is really good, because as long as your units don't die, usually your morale won't drop. It only will drop if units on your side will start dying, or the enemy is playing with dirty tricks with morale destroying units. But at the end of the day, most of the time, it's really easy to achieve a morale advantage with this culture. You can, of course, go even deeper down that road and play out the Tome of Revelry card. They also synergize really well with the Tome of the Doom Herald, because, everywhere where you start touching the morale gameplay, the Industrious culture is really thriving in, because, combats last a little bit longer with these guys, so might as well make the best out of it while we're at it. And therefore, you have an advantage there. But it doesn't end there. The fact that you have these high damage numbers, but a single shot on your Arbalest, for example, makes them a very, very good receiver for crits. Not so much for enchantments, because other archers get to shoot up to 3 times. These guys only 1 time. So therefore, crits are really good for them. But the same goes for your relatively low damage profile shield units. They have a lower base damage than the average fighter. I don't really know why they did that, but it is a thing. But with crits and the chance of crits, it really, really goes well. And the last part about all this, the last part of the synergy, if the enemy's morale starts to drop, the enemy will start to fumble, and that makes your already high defenses even more powerful, because it's already a damage reduction and it's hitting a super high armored target, and that's where the enemy will almost not even hurt you anymore. And that's really good. So these things make the Industrious faction go damn strong, and I had many, many good games with that on hard difficulty. Admittedly, I didn't go for brutal yet, but I personally don't see them weaker. I just see that you have to hustle way more in any aspect, The Industrious culture, you could say that it comes with a name, and you have to work hard for your success, but I gotta say the payoff is damn satisfying with all the playstyles that they are compatible with. So I hope that was helpful for you. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you thought I have forgotten here, because I'm pretty sure that there are way more than just 10 advanced tips for these guys. And of course, I'd be appreciating a thumbs up or even a subscription, I wanted to say. And there are plenty of other Age of Wonders info videos in the description box. There's a playlist link. Check it out if you want to check out more about stuff. Binge incoming. So, last but not least, Big thanks to the supporters of the channel. You guys are always amazing me with your awesome things that you do for me and for the channel, of course. And check out Patreon, PayPal, and buy me a coffee if you want to be so kind. And if not, let me thank you for hanging out on this video until the very end. I appreciate very much so. Have a wonderful day. See you next time.